A city destined to vanish from history was quietly saved. Not by armies, not by generals, but by the tunnels beneath its streets, the very veins its enemies never knew existed. This hook works because it immediately sets up a paradox. How could an empire survive because of something hidden and overlooked? It makes viewers ask, what are these tunnels, and how did they save Byzantium? The year was 626 CE, and the city of Constantinople, jewel of the Eastern Roman Empire, teetered on the edge of oblivion. Armies from the Avar Khaganate and the Sassanid Persians had surrounded the city, their siege engines pounding its walls. Reports from the streets spoke of imminent doom. Even the city's defenders whispered of surrender. Every historian would later mark this as a turning point. The empire should have fallen. Yet against every expectation, the impossible occurred. Constantinople did not fall. The paradox was glaring. The city stood, intact and undefeated, despite being surrounded by forces far superior in number and firepower. How? To understand, one must look below, far below the cobbled streets and grand palaces, where shadows clung to stone, and the forgotten murmurs of labor echoed through labyrinthine tunnels. These tunnels, constructed in secret over decades, were more than a feat of engineering. They were the lifeblood of a city poised on the knife's edge of annihilation. The construction of these tunnels was shrouded in secrecy. Imperial engineers worked in the dead of night, carving passageways beneath foundations of churches, markets, and barracks. The laborers, sworn to silence under threat of death, moved stone by stone, channeling water from distant aqueducts and creating hidden pathways that only the city's defenders knew. The purpose, on the surface, seemed mundane: water supply, storage, and secret movement. But in time, these tunnels would serve a function far more critical, one that no invader could anticipate. As the siege tightened, food became scarce, morale faltered, and disease spread. Enemy forces believed the city would succumb within weeks, yet from the tunnels came hope. Messengers traversed paths unseen by the Avar and Persian forces, carrying orders, intelligence, and crucial supplies. Soldiers vanished from one gate only to emerge behind enemy lines, striking with precision before disappearing into stone corridors as if the city itself were alive and fighting back. And yet, for all its brilliance, the tunnels were not invincible. Parts of the network collapsed under pressure, and secret entrances had to be hidden quickly to avoid discovery. The defenders knew that if even one section were breached, the city's fate could change overnight. Every decision, every movement through these hidden veins, carried the weight of an empire's survival. Constantinople's fall seemed inevitable, yet the unseen tunnels held a secret that would redefine history. The question lingers in the viewer's mind. How exactly did these tunnels work to save the empire? And what risks did the city face from within its own hidden network? How could a city under siege, starving and surrounded, strike its enemies with precision without ever leaving the shadows beneath its own streets? The tunnels were not mere escape routes. They were an invisible weapon, a hidden chessboard beneath Constantinople. Every stone, every narrow corridor, had been placed with foresight, anticipating moments that would test the city's very survival. For outsiders, the siege was straightforward: walls, gates, battering rams. But inside, a different war unfolded, one played in silence, darkness, and shadows. Early in the siege, scouts from the Avar forces patrolled the perimeter, confident that no aid could reach the defenders. Yet in the dead of night, city soldiers appeared behind enemy lines, carrying messages and flammable materials. Watchtowers reported strange disappearances. Sentries thought the city was retreating, only to discover ambushes that left the enemy baffled. How did Constantinople achieve such surgical strikes against a vastly superior force? The answer lay in the labyrinth beneath the city, a network so complex that even many of its own defenders feared becoming lost within it. The tunnels were more than passageways. They contained hidden chambers stocked with weapons, secret armories disguised as rubble, and concealed alcoves where soldiers could rest before emerging at the exact moment that would strike terror into the enemy. One chamber, known only to a few commanders, held crates of Greek fire, the empire's most feared weapon. Yet even this weapon, as lethal as it was, required a precise plan. A misstep could ignite the very tunnels meant to protect the city. Could one miscalculation have doomed thousands of lives? Indeed, risk was constant. Enemy spies, captured deserters, and even traitorous citizens threatened to expose the tunnel's secrets. The commanders devised codes, false entrances, and decoy passages to ensure the labyrinth remained a puzzle only Constantinople could solve. Soldiers navigating its corridors relied on memory, intuition, and whispered instructions. A single wrong turn could trap them in darkness for hours, or worse, deliver them straight into enemy hands. The tension was suffocating, and yet the city persisted. One night, a critical operation unfolded. Persian forces attempted a silent assault on the eastern wall, hoping to catch the city off guard. From within the tunnels, defenders emerged like shadows, striking with arrows and Greek fire, before vanishing back into the stone maze. The Persians were left disoriented, unsure of how the city could appear simultaneously in multiple locations. Historians later noted that the enemy believed Constantinople had reinforcements from outside, when in reality it was the tunnels themselves orchestrating this phantom army. But even as victories unfolded, fear lingered in the hearts of the city's leaders. Could the tunnels, designed in peacetime for utility and secrecy, sustain such prolonged, deadly operations? The corridors were narrow, supplies finite, and the strain on soldiers unimaginable. Every night brought new questions. Would the walls hold? Would the tunnels collapse? Would the enemy discover their secret? Amid this uncertainty, whispers of betrayal surfaced. Some citizens claimed the emperor hoarded knowledge of hidden passages for his own safety. Others suspected that rival commanders would use the labyrinth against one another. Could internal distrust have been more dangerous than the enemy itself? Every echo in the stone corridors, every flicker of torchlight, carried a weight far heavier than mere bricks. And yet, the tunnels continued to perform miracles. Messages that would have taken days on the surface were delivered in hours. Reinforcements moved unseen, and supplies reached those most in need. The labyrinth had transformed from a silent utility to the empire's pulse, invisible, indispensable, and terrifyingly efficient. How could such a fragile, human-engineered network outwit some of the most disciplined armies in history? As the siege wore on, Constantinople's defenders became almost superstitious about the tunnels, whispering that the city itself was alive, moving through stone and shadow. Each successful strike against the enemy reinforced this belief. And yet, every operation carried a hidden cost. Collapsed sections, near-death encounters, and exhausted soldiers reminded all that the labyrinth's magic was fragile. One mistake could have turned salvation into catastrophe. And then, one night, the tunnels revealed a secret that not even the city's leaders anticipated. A passage that could change the course of the siege entirely. But whose hands would guide the city through it? And could Constantinople survive if the enemy discovered this hidden artery? How could a network of cold, silent stone decide the fate of an empire when no army, no general, and no human could see the full picture? The labyrinth beneath Constantinople had transformed from a hidden utility into a lethal instrument of survival. Soldiers moved through its narrow corridors with uncanny precision, emerging to strike the enemy and vanish before retaliation. Yet as the siege entered its fourth week, the stakes became higher than ever. The enemy had begun to sense that something unnatural was at work. Movements that should have taken hours seemed instantaneous. Defenders appeared in multiple locations at the same time. Whispered rumors among the Avar and Persian forces spoke of ghosts, an entire army materializing from nowhere. But ghosts were only half the story. Beneath the city, the tunnels themselves had begun to betray signs of wear. Sections carved decades earlier were cracking, stones shifting as if the city itself trembled under the weight of survival. Soldiers, navigating these corridors, constantly tested their memory, stepping lightly to avoid triggering collapses. One misstep could trap a messenger in darkness for days, or worse, leave them vulnerable to enemy patrols who had somehow discovered a minor entrance. It was during one particularly harrowing night that the labyrinth's true power revealed itself. Persian forces attempted a daring assault on the southern wall, concentrating their battering rams at a weak point that intelligence suggested was lightly defended. The defenders, aware of the imminent threat, activated a plan that had been whispered about, but never tested. Soldiers moved silently through a previously unknown branch of the tunnels, reaching the enemy's flank undetected. From hidden alcoves, they unleashed a combination of arrows, boiling oil, and Greek fire, forcing the attackers into confusion and retreat. The tunnels, silent and invisible, were performing what even the most disciplined armies could not achieve. Entire battle formations were neutralized without the city's defenders ever being fully exposed. Yet at the same time, every action through the tunnels carried immense risk. Collapsed passages, trapped soldiers, and the looming possibility of discovery by traitors meant that each operation could have ended in disaster. While the defenders triumphed repeatedly, the siege began to take a psychological toll. Soldiers spoke in hushed tones of the living stone, a labyrinth that seemed to guide, protect, and punish all at once. Messages that once flowed easily now took unpredictable routes. Routes planned meticulously sometimes ended in blocked paths or sudden collapses. Could the very tunnels that had saved the city now betray it? The emperor himself became increasingly reliant on these hidden corridors. Orders that would have once been shouted across courtyards or sent by messengers riding through enemy lines were now passed through stone arteries, invisible to all but the initiated. And yet, even he could not fully trust the tunnels. One night, a detachment sent to deliver critical supplies vanished without a trace. The corridors had swallowed them, leaving only whispers and questions. Were they lost forever? Or had the labyrinth directed them to safety in a way no human could comprehend? Enemy spies captured within the city revealed fragments of the truth. They described passages that seemed impossible, alcoves that defied logical construction, and movements so rapid that defenders appeared and disappeared at will. These reports only deepened the mystery, reinforcing the psychological advantage that Constantinople now held. The invaders, already demoralized by the unexpected resistance, became obsessed with uncovering the tunnels. Every failed reconnaissance mission left them weaker, more confused, and more certain that the city's survival was aided by forces beyond their understanding. Amid the chaos, a revelation emerged that would change the course of the siege entirely. Within the tunnels, engineers had discovered a hidden cistern connected to a previously unknown aqueduct. This reservoir contained fresh water and supplies, enough to sustain hundreds of soldiers for weeks. Suddenly, the labyrinth was not just a weapon, it was a lifeline. The defenders could strike, retreat, and regroup without fear of starvation or thirst. Could this secret have been the Empire's saving grace all along? Or was it merely delaying an inevitable catastrophe? Yet danger lurked even in victory. The enemy, desperate and cunning, began probing for weaknesses within the labyrinth itself. Minor collapses were no longer accidents, but suspected sabotage. Fear gripped the city as leaders realized that the tunnels, while their greatest asset, were also fragile. One wrong decision, one misjudged turn, and the Empire could fall not by siege engines or arrows, but by the very stone beneath its feet. Amid the tension, soldiers told stories of hearing voices echo through the passages, of shadows that seemed to move with intent, of corridors that twisted in ways no map could describe. Some claimed the tunnels themselves were alive, guiding the city's fate. Others whispered that the spirits of ancient Byzantines had returned to protect their home. Whether legend or truth, these tales fueled a mix of fear and awe, keeping the defenders vigilant, alert, and strangely empowered. The siege continued day after day, the labyrinth silently orchestrating a delicate dance between life and death. And then, as the enemy prepared what they believed would be the final assault, the tunnels revealed a feature no one had anticipated: a hidden exit directly behind the Avar lines, allowing the defenders to strike decisively at the heart of the besieging army. The move was bold, dangerous, and entirely reliant on the tunnel's secrecy. If the enemy discovered it even hours too early, it would have spelled disaster. And so, Constantinople prepared to gamble everything on a stone corridor unseen by the enemy. Could a labyrinth, carved in secrecy and darkness, truly decide the fate of an empire? Or was the city's survival about to hinge on luck, betrayal, and forces beyond human comprehension? How could a city under siege, surrounded by thousands of enemies and teetering on the brink of annihilation, survive not because of walls, swords, or strategy, but because of darkness, stone, and silence? The final days of the siege arrived like a storm, relentless, unforgiving, and merciless. Avar and Persian forces had grown desperate, probing every inch of the city for weaknesses. Every assault was fiercer, every attack smarter, yet each seemed to falter against something the invaders could not see. Soldiers on the walls reported ghostly movements, defenders appearing in places they should not be, arrows flying from unseen positions, and a strange, almost supernatural precision in counterattacks. Beneath it all, the tunnels were alive. They had become more than mere passageways. They were arteries through which the city's lifeblood flowed. Messages, supplies, and reinforcements moved unseen, yet every step carried danger. Portions of the labyrinth had begun to collapse under the strain, and engineers worked tirelessly in darkness to shore up weak points, often in silence and under threat of enemy detection. One wrong hammer strike, one dislodged stone, could have brought entire sections down, burying men alive and sealing the city's fate. It was in this tense atmosphere that the city's commanders devised what could be called the ultimate gambit. A series of tunnels, previously used only for supplies and messages, would become the launching points for a decisive strike. The plan was audacious. Soldiers would move silently behind enemy lines, strike the heart of the Avar siege encampment, and return before dawn, all guided by the labyrinth's hidden corridors. The paradox was clear. A city trapped and encircled by superior forces would attack first, striking from places no one outside knew existed. The night of the operation arrived. Torches flickered in hidden chambers, shadows danced along the walls, and soldiers whispered final prayers. The tunnels seemed to breathe, echoing footsteps that carried both hope and dread. Every movement was calculated, yet unpredictable. The enemy was no longer cautious. They were paranoid. Patrols increased, traps were laid, and scouts were dispatched to uncover the hidden veins beneath the city. Could the defenders complete their mission before discovery turned their advantage into annihilation? As the first detachments emerged behind enemy lines, chaos erupted. Archers unleashed volleys of arrows from positions the enemy could not comprehend. Saboteurs set fire to supplies and siege engines, then vanished into the shadows. Panic spread through the Avar and Persian forces as they struggled to understand how a city supposedly under siege could strike with such lethal efficiency. Every assault seemed ghostly, almost impossible. The tunnels had transformed the defenders into a phantom army, a force the enemy could neither anticipate nor confront directly. Yet even in victory, danger persisted. Collapses occurred mid-operation, forcing soldiers to navigate alternative routes while carrying weapons, fire, and messages. Exhaustion gnawed at every man. Every step risked death, and the labyrinth itself seemed to resist them at times, as though the city demanded respect for the sacrifices made in its construction. Could human determination alone guide men through a network that had defied design, gravity, and reason? Or had the city's survival become dependent on forces no one could fully understand? By dawn, the operation had achieved what no one thought possible. The enemy's morale shattered, the siege engines were destroyed or disabled, and the Avar and Persian commanders faced confusion, fear, and retreat. The paradox was undeniable. A city encircled by overwhelming forces had turned the tables, not through superior numbers, but through the ingenuity hidden beneath its streets. The labyrinth, built in secrecy and obscurity, had dictated the course of history. But the tunnels' story did not end with victory. In the aftermath, the commanders discovered sections previously unknown. Hidden chambers filled with forgotten supplies, maps, and inscriptions hinting at the foresight of earlier generations. Some passages led to collapsed portions of the walls, where enemies had attempted infiltration, suggesting that the labyrinth had not only protected the city, but had anticipated enemy strategy in ways even the engineers could not fully grasp. Could this have been coincidence? Or was the city itself somehow aware, guiding defenders and punishing intruders alike? For centuries, historians would debate the extent to which Constantinople's survival was due to walls, armies, and leadership, versus the unseen tunnels beneath. Some argued that the labyrinth had been merely a tool, a set of cleverly engineered corridors. Others whispered of something more profound, that the city, through its ingenuity, will, and secrets, had achieved a form of self-preservation that transcended ordinary warfare. The paradox remained. A city could survive not because of what it showed the world, but because of what it hid from it. Even today, remnants of these tunnels survive beneath the modern streets of Istanbul. Archaeologists and engineers have uncovered portions, but much of the network remains inaccessible, buried beneath layers of history, legend, and urban development. Visitors can walk along the surface, marvel at the Hagia Sophia, and imagine the bustling markets. Yet beneath their feet lies a silent testament to human ingenuity and resilience. The tunnels whisper of a city that refused to die, of strategy hidden in shadows, and of a paradox so profound that it defies imagination. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not in the open, but in darkness. And yet, questions linger. How many lives were lost within the labyrinth, never recorded in chronicles? How many battles did the city win because of passages now lost forever? Could a single misstep have ended the Eastern Roman Empire in that fateful year, leaving the world unrecognizable? The answers may never be fully known, yet the story endures. A reminder that history is not just written in stone and ink, but in the hidden veins of cities, in secrets carefully guarded, and in courage quietly exercised beneath the world's gaze. Next time someone walks the streets of Istanbul, beneath the bustling crowds and echoing minarets, they might wonder, could they step over the very stones that once carried soldiers through darkness, and feel, even for a moment, the heartbeat of a city that defied annihilation, a labyrinth that saved an empire, and perhaps changed the course of history itself?